All right, everyone. Happy Thursday and welcome again to our neurodiversity webinars. My name's Nat, Head of Community at Exceptional Individuals. We like to do these deep dives into interesting subjects and see how they relate to the world of neurodiverse. Now, as some of you may know by now, I'm neurodiverse, so is about 80% of my team. So we're experts via experience, but I'm also doing a cheeky master's in neuroscience in order to combine lived experience with a nice bit of theory to hopefully add a new perspective to it. And with that, let's get to it. We are going to be looking at stigma today, and particularly how neurodiversity or neurodivergence has been stigmatized. Now, I'm going to be using those terms interchangeably because ultimately, stigma, it doesn't really matter if someone is discriminating against you for having autism or if someone's discriminating against you for being quirky, thinking a bit different, having your own approaches. It still hurts. It still has negative consequences. So we're going to be looking on the micro level about how it affects you personally, but also how it affects us on a society scale, because it has way bigger impact than just, that hasn't made me feel great. While we are going to be talking about dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, ADHD today, we are obviously including all neurodivergence. I just mainly reference these ones because most people can relate to them because they're the most prominent in society. Now, this is a picture of our team. What a lovely bunch. Today, it's myself, Nat, and we've also got April, and we are going to be taking you on this journey today on stigma, learning a little bit of history, a bit about where we currently are, and also moving forward. How do we get rid of it? We've come a long way from thinking all people with autism are mad. We've also come a long way from thinking that you're a bad parent if your child is neurodivergent. But it doesn't mean that we're completely out of the woods yet, and we still have a long way to go, as I'm sure a lot of you have prior experience with. Now, our last webinar we did last week was a history of diagnosis, and that's now uploaded to YouTube. Check it out. I did put that fun little image on. I love Blink, but also I thought it was kind of relevant. And do check it out. I thought it was a really interesting session. The last few weeks, we've been learning about diagnosis, about kind of labeling, about what it means to be neurodiverse. Is it even a useful name, label? And we've had lots of interesting views and debates around it. In short, most of us have said, while nothing is perfect, it's probably a lot better than what came before it, which was, disability and a lot of unhelpful labels or words that maybe were helpful at the time, but have since become a bit outdated. Stigma and neurodiversity. Two words which shouldn't go together, but sadly does. They're two peas in a pod, but they don't want to be in that pod. So let's start off with some quick understanding. What is stigma to you? What does the word stigma mean? I mean, I'm quite familiar with it now because obviously it's what I do, but I remember a few years back, I had no idea what it was. It seemed like kind of a odd word. And if you Google stigma, you get loads of pictures of flowers that pop up. I'm guessing that's part of a flower. Okay, we've got controversy, picked or on pointed to, or people thinking negatively. Yeah, there's kind of a lot that can be baked into it. Oh, nice. Well, not nice, but judged for being yourself. Yep. Okay, we've got inaccurate assumptions. Yes, judgment. I mean, all of these things really are it. Stereotypes. Yeah, stereotype is this kind of idea we have. For instance, all British people have bad teeth. That's offensive. I mean, I know I'm not exactly the right person to say that, but still. Or when you kind of think of maybe a race, a culture, a religion, a type of person, and you have these preconceived ideas, and if they influence your decisions or how you act around them, that's a great example. We got cannot fit into the culture. And that's a really good example because culture is something that we created. So it doesn't mean that it's natural, there's anything wrong with us at all. It just means that how people currently think is deemed acceptable currently. Maybe there's a stigma against people who have tattoos and wants to get a job in the business world. Maybe there's a stigma that you might be in your 30s and still absolutely obsessed with Pokemon. It would be like that, right? These stigmas can affect on all different areas. We see it so much at school. and it does happen in adult life, they just tend to be a little bit more subtle and a little bit more cheeky. Negative views, yeah, absolutely. Witches had stigma and they burned them down. Yeah, hopefully not many of us get burned these days, but we still get, metaphorically burned. But it's true. Things have been pretty grim in the past. Now, a good way of defining it is from Jennifer Boyd, who's a doctor, and she defines it as an attribute, behavior, or reputation which is socially discrediting in a particular way. So if we're breaking that down, it's how you act, how you present yourself, kind of what you do in day to day, or maybe how people kind of perceive you. They already have these ideas. And if they have all these views, which of course we do, we're human beings, we always make snap views of people. But if you then act negatively or kind of change your views in a negative way towards them, is when someone is being stigmatized. She goes on to say, causes an individual to be classified by others in an undesirable, rejected stereotype rather than accepted normal one. And this goes back to the whole thing like normal, abnormal. Can anything really be abnormal? Is abnormal something which is in a minority? Is abnormal something which you personally don't like? Is abnormal something which is broken or wrong? I mean, when you really break it down, it's not any of those. Abnormal is something which you decide if is normal or not. And typically the majority will decide that. So here is a quick history to understand that people have been jerks for a very long time. And, having kind of like these inbuilt ideas of people is a really natural thing. If we didn't have like a form of stigma, we'd probably been eaten by lions. If you see a lion over there and you're like, do you know what? I'm not going to judge the lion. I'm sure he's lovely. You're going to get eaten. So it's good to have these ideas. You build this database up that, oh, that equals bad. Or if that food's green, it's probably going to poison me. So like having these ideas about something before we've interacted with it is healthy. It's when we push them too far and we kind of apply that same logic to human beings. Oh, they have a different skin color to me. You know what? I got beat up once by someone who looked different to me. I'm going to stay clear. And we apply, and it just doesn't quite translate to where we are as a society nowadays. And as one of you rightly mentioned about witch trials, here, people who had schizophrenia or severe mental health challenges or even autism were seen as mad, crazy, and possessed by devils. So yeah, they were essentially locked up, and it didn't end well for them. Christian says, Jesus gave us stigma as some have holes in hands and feet. Explain upon that a bit more. I mean, when you look at like how stigma originated, it has literally been with us through all of history.
I think it meant stigmata.
Stigmata, okay. Yeah, thank you. So now let's have a quick little dive into the history of disorder classification. This will give us we talked about this last week, but a bit of a refresh isn't going to hurt. First of all, ancient Greece is when we started off with the first kind of categorization. I mean, these were on like clay tablets, nothing advanced, but it shows that people were thinking about this. 19th century, a new system was created, this one which was a little bit more universal, and we're starting to get some sort of solid nature. 20th century, the now famous DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders, and the ICD was kind of like created. We talked about why this is good and bad. It's problematic, but it's the best we've got at the moment, arguably. And now in the 21st century, we've currently got the DSM-11 and DSM-5 are being developed. Now, you might say, Nat, aren't they already developed? Well, it's a working document. Eventually, we'll probably have the DS-12 and the DSM-6. Now, these two documents, sometimes they try to kind of like gel together, but also they're competing documents. So they don't completely align up. The ICD is used a lot in the UK, but I would say the DSM is a bit more universal. Or Natalie says some places in the world still practice witch hunting. Oh dear, which affects minorities still. Some religions and beliefs drive this, unfortunately. And it is true, the more kind of educated a society comes, the less stigma that there is. Or maybe is it that the stigma just changes and it kind of goes into a different area? You tell me. Now, for this one, I want you to share your views on what is the public's views on neurodiverse individuals. Now, I appreciate I put Stewie in a as an insane asylum costume. It doesn't have to be negative. Maybe you think there's positives as well about how we are viewed in society. Or this might just be how you feel people view you in society, because obviously not everyone's going to say anything. Amy has says creative, and that's great. I do think, while some of us might have positive and negative experiences, some might be more positive, others may be more negative. Also, it depends on your diagnosis. People will view someone with autism quite different to how they might view someone with dyslexia. Dyslexia might be viewed as, oh, not a big deal. I don't even think you need any support, which in itself is not great. And autism might be viewed as needing a lot of support and incredibly unable to function in day-to-day society, which we know isn't true. So what have we got? We've got, while some people may view neurodiverse individuals as stupid, they may also view them as intelligent. Yeah, that is true. When we watch things like Rayman or like Big Bang Theory, you always see that while people who have neurodiverse tendencies are clearly very intelligent, they still kind of display them often lacking a sense of common knowledge or like street smarts. Hey, anyone else? It's really interesting to know like what you think or how do you think people perceive you, whether or not it's very obvious or whether or not it's only when you tell them that you're neurodiverse. We've also got selfish. One common thing employers will normally ask me is that, oh, the person who has autism isn't particularly a team player. They're narcissistic. They sometimes can use quite strong words, and that's due to them not really interpreting the characteristics in the correct way. Yes, blunt or rude. This is something that I get all the time. I often people think, oh, Nat, he's so controversial. He's unfiltered. Just too honest. And these words can be seen as positive, but they also can be seen as negative. Like people may say these to my face like as a good thing, but when it comes to say like speaking opportunities, they may choose not to invite me. So again, things can be a double-edged sword. Most people are ignorant about diversity and differing needs, absolutely. Lazy, can't get things done, late to submit. Yes, just because, there might be a few mistakes, laziness is always like the number one go-to. Unfortunately, I think some still think simply there is something wrong / not normal. Yes, and the idea that, oh, it's not your fault, there's not a cure yet. So sometimes the negative views people have on us aren't as straightforward as saying a mean word to someone. It could be that they have a nice intention about, you know what, it's not your fault, we'll fix that. It's still wrong, even though they have probably a nice intention at heart. It's just kind of not founded in what's actually useful. Helen says, there is a belief that all autistic people have an intellectual disability. Yeah, that's one of the number one neuro myths I'm always having to correct. The idea that you lack empathy, which again is totally not true either, this causes discrimination. Yep, every time people think autism, they think lack of empathy, then they jump to serial killer. I'm like, come on, guys, that's a bit of a step. And it's not true. Arguably, a lot of people with autism have higher levels of empathy because they connect so emotionally to a situation that it can kind of cause sensory overload. It's just not true. Or the way they demonstrate empathy is different to how you might demonstrate empathy, for example. So you just kind of overwrite it as non-existence. Yeah, those without gifts always threw stone. Oh, yeah, those in glass houses. We got late, unfortunately. Yep, I mean, all of you are absolutely right. The views are so widespread and so different. We even did a session a while back on how it's affected through different cultures. And as we said, some cultures will see us as possessed, others will see us as a liability, will see us a drain on resources, will see us as geniuses, as kind of the kind of hidden link. You know, it ranges so dramatically. Some people will see us as like mutants of superheroes who have abnormal abilities. All right, so now let's go on to living with a label and what kind of meaning that label has. And when you have that label, while there are benefits to having that label, you do then get like a whole new sack of goodies of reasons why people might have ideas about you already. Again, with a label, the idea of a label is that it does give people an idea of how to support you. But with that, it also gives people an idea on what you can and cannot do. So when we look at the research of stigma, you would like to think that a lot of work is going into it. However, there are some real common problems with the research that is currently being done. So let's have a quick look at them. First of all, a lot of stigma research is focused on schizophrenia. It just is. You know, if you were to do a research on like a Google Scholar, it's all schizophrenia. There's not that much around on neurodivergence, such as dyslexia, autism, ADHD, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So this is one of the real big issues here is there that much work being done on understanding the cause? I had someone reach out to me today asking to explore the link between suicide and autism. And I'll be honest with you, it wasn't something that initially jumped to my mind as, oh, that's definitely an area I need to cover. But then when you kind of break it down, I can kind of see why there potentially might be higher likelihood there. I don't know the stats, but I'm saying it's interesting to research because there isn't much research on it at the moment. So let's what's the next one? I do love these spinny wheels. Okay, the next biggest issue we have is few intervention studies. So while people might do some studies, they don't often use participants. They don't kind of do things which are a bit more hands-on and tangible. What other ones do we have? I'm glad it gets bigger because it's very tiny. Nice, based on surveys and media. So the research that is available is also, you know, it's not the best. It's like, you know, those tick box exercises. It's not really that in depth. So you can't really take a real view image of it. And lastly, no server user participation. So what we mean by this is typically it'll be non-neurodiverse people doing studies about neurodiversity, and they're not using people who are actually affected, people who are recipients of discrimination and stigma. So again, there's not much research, and the research there is a bit lackluster. There's a room for improvement. And Helen says, why so much research based on children? That's another thing, Helen, it is. I mean, there's a few reasons, isn't there? It could be due to the funding. There's more funding available for children. It could be due to preconceived ideas that neurodiversity predominantly affects children, which obviously we know is not true because it's lifelong. It also could be that children tend to be, just more fundable. No one cares about the adults. It is true, you just kind of stop existing. Oh, nice. Anna says, I guess because they want to try to find a way to mitigate negative factors and how they impact later on life. It's true. Oh, maybe they just think, you know what? The older people, it's too late for them. Let's focus on tomorrow. But by doing that, you're not helping the people who need the help, who can then help the next generation. So there's lots of kind of potential avenues and reasons why this might be. So on here is some stigma research limitations. Why we aren't really moving forward with trying to understand this better. Helen also says, yes, there's also the focus on cure rather than unlocking potential. Yes, I totally agree. That's actually a really big roadblock when it comes to supporting neurodiverse people. And it says, children are easier to access through schools rather than trying to engage with adults. Yeah, that's another really good option. So let's see what do you all think are some of the biggest limitations? What we've got at number one at this moment, though obviously it could change, stigma is considered hard to change. Yep, it's too damn difficult. Why even bother? It's so ingrained and rooted in society. Is it something we're ever going to be able to get over? A good example of this, or at least one that comes to mind, is remember when Barack Obama kind of got into the White House and everyone was like, it's the end of racism. And then Trump came next. Because it shows you that even though it might appear that we have come a long way, it's hard to know people's deep-rooted belief systems. Number two, we've got low attention to cultural and social factors. All that's just swapped. So not really paying attention on how things are in the real world. We've got academics have neglected to connect with disability law. So what this is saying is that, yeah, academics might be doing some great work, but they're not really implementing that into our laws and systems. So our laws are really outdated, even though there is currently research on it. So what is the point of the research? We've got studies mostly use attitude surveys, not interventions. This is just saying it's not that in depth. So an attitude survey is just, okay, can you tell me, have you experienced, how do you feel? And people have to say yes or no. But an intervention is when you're actually working with someone, you're monitoring it, and you have a real case example. And the last one we got, little input from service users. This one is just saying they're not using us in order to inform their research. They're not they're talking about us and not with us. So I actually would say that should be a bit higher personally. So interesting. There's many, many reasons why we're not really moving forward that fast. Now, I want to talk a bit about how culture influenced stigma. So we talked from like a legal perspective, we talked a little bit about from an academic perspective, but how do you think it affects people from different backgrounds or different views and beliefs? I mean, this is a bit more of an open-ended one. So for instance, maybe some of you are from what would be considered a minority background in the UK or wherever you are in the world. Do you think that plus being neurodiverse equals its own kind of stigma, or it's somehow different? Helen says, I think lack of input from service users, that enables ableism and unconscious bias. Nice. Anna says, they could try accessing users through employment support services, what is seen as a lot of neurodiverse diagnosed and undiagnosed. Yep. Amy says, we need to look at intersectionality. Absolutely. Intersectionality is important. That is about intersectionality is understanding that there is a lot of different factors that goes into kind of any idea of someone. You can't just see someone as a dyslexic person. They're a dyslexic person. They might also be male, female, or other. They might from their economic background, the sexuality. There's a whole lot of stuff going on, and it can make it really difficult. Now, I can see on this one how culture influenced stigma. What we got, most studies about effective interventions to reduce stigma and discrimination originate in high-income countries. So this is saying, while there may be some information on discrimination, it's not really universal. As always, white, male, rich, that tends to be the demographic that gets the most attention. Now, we know neurodivergence affects people of different genders and backgrounds differently, but yet the research doesn't represent that. So there's a real disconnect. Natalie says, until there are functional systems in place instead of status quo, there can be no true accountability. Without accountability, there can be no equality, diversity, inclusion, and belonging.
Accessibility. Accessibility.
Accessibility, thank you. I mean, I was struggling to read these as we go, but I do my best.
No, sorry, that's my bad. I use a lot of long words. It's just normal to me. Apologies.
No, I encourage it. I like trying to fathom them out. So what else have we got? So I can see this one is a tough one to answer. Some of the ideas of how culture has impacted stigmas between neurodiverse people is that neurodiverse symptoms can be viewed as supernatural. Now, this might seem like ridiculous, right? It's actually more common than you would think. There are a lot of countries And I've spoken to a lot of people who it's still kind of demonized. It's seen as like the devil at work. Now, if we were to apply our Western techniques on how to overcome discrimination, particularly for neurodiverse people, it's probably not going to work for the people who have these ideas already. We also know that stigma affects marriage prospects in some societies. Now, you might think, I mean, I do that. I don't really believe in marriage much these days. I think maybe it's falling out of fashion in like Western countries. That's just my perception. I don't know if that's true or not. But for a lot of countries, and even in the UK and certain religions, marriage is a really big part of it. And the second that you have a label such as ADHD, the value in your prospects kind of plummets. And you start to feel more segregated, more isolated from society, and it can be harder to find your significant other, whoever that may be. And we've also got close family ties can contribute to stigma. So when things stay quite like closed off and you can't kind of talk to other people's opinions and views and get knowledge from elsewhere, you don't really kind of evolve your understanding. So it's why that a lot of views just continue for generations and generations and generations. People aren't having the exposure to like different viewpoints that probably would be beneficial to them. Now I'm going to move because this little girl pulling her head off is kind of scaring me. Oh, Helen says, I think how neurodivergent people are presented in the UK leads to bias. Neurodivergent thinking is more accepted in other cultures, even when they is not acknowledged or diagnosed. Oh, that's an interesting way of looking at it. We've got the media latches on to stories that involve minority cultures becoming unhinged. Yeah, that's a story that people love, keep repeating time and time again, even though they are extremely rare, even in America, where outrageous violence is a normal part of their culture, unfortunately. Yeah, and like every time there is someone who is the other or different to most people that you'll see on a day-to-day, if one thing happens, that'll be like headline news. You can bet if someone was to commit a crime and they happen to be autistic, you know that's going to be the complete thing they really focus on. Oh, we got by presented, I mean TV and media. Yeah. Now, another factor to look at is socioeconomical. And this is understanding the social and the economic conditions that can affect people. So again, someone who, say, has dyspraxia in a very privileged, well-off community is going to have very different interactions with how people view them compared to someone who's on benefits. Poverty and healthcare access does drop. I love the NHS in the UK, but it is under tremendous amount of pressure at the moment. And let's be honest, its neurodiverse support has always been, it's not great. But if you've got private care, barely a problem, not even an inconvenience. You've also got long link to outcomes of ND. So if you have less money, essentially the idea of having support, it does have an impact. You will notice. And also expected and actual discrimination. So while people might expect discrimination, these factors all indicate. This goes back to what some of you were saying about intersectionality. Oh, we've got, yes, the media creates sound bites. Yeah, they're not great for us. We've got, this is typical NLP in practice, as a soundbite helps memory capacity, unfortunately. There are so many reasons, and though it might seem a bit doom and gloom, by understanding it, we can start to overcome it. It's the fact that a lot of us put our heads in the sand, which is the reason why we don't seem to make much progress. So now let's look about how we can actually change things. Anti-stigma campaigns. What has happened before? What has worked? And what should we keep doing? So which of these anti-stigma campaigns do you think are the most effective in order to make change in a community? We've got public awareness campaigns, so getting more people aware, more people talking about it, social interactions, just speaking to your neighbor, your friend, just being like that raw conversation, education, get them young, make sure people understand it early on, or lastly, how the media reports. I mean, all of these are going to be good and useful, aren't they? But is there one that you think is going to have the biggest impact and where we should put like all our chips? Okay, let's see what all of you said. I don't know which one I would pick, to be honest. Yeah. Oh, public awareness campaigns. That's got the winning vote. I mean, a lot of you, I'd be interested to know why you think that, or why you think that might not be the route to go. I mean, obviously, the nice answer is, can't we just do them all equally? I would probably say media reporting, it might be the more difficult one. Campaigns is something that we can all get involved in and affect a large amount of people. I have found one of the most effective ways is just having like one-on-one conversations. Whenever I speak to someone, I just bring it into conversation. I don't make the whole conversation about it, but I just kind of always talk about the benefits and the amazing and the exceptional individuals that I work with to kind of hopefully change that dialogue. Yes, should the media be educated? I would say so. And what are some other approaches? So some other approaches is annual events, having things which are like Neurodiversity Celebration Week, Dyslexia Week, ADHD Week. I mean, there are a lot of different weeks and months out there, to be honest with you. When I'm looking at the calendar about events, they're all over the place. And you've got ones which are national, like just UK based, and you have ones which are international. They don't really line up that well, but it is a good way to keep in people's mind. Now, that is a good thing. The downside of this, though, is fortunately, I work with a lot of organizations. I don't hear or see them for an entire year. And then when Celebration Week comes around, suddenly they pick up the phone. Where are you the rest of the year? So pros and cons to having annual events. Celebrity advocates like Richard Branson. Now, this one I think could get a bit controversial because, you know, I could see a lot of these people are quite polarizing figures. Do you think celebrities are good or bad when it comes to advocating? Yes, he has overcome tremendous adversity and has become one of the most richest and successful people in history. But is he so successful now that he becomes alienating to a lot of us? And when people say, oh yeah, dyslexia, Richard Branson has dyslexia, does that kind of offer the kind of impact that we would like to see? Also, when you look at people who aren't, again, white and male, and like if I was to ask some of you, who is a non-white, not male, autistic celebrity? You know, the amount of ideas that come to mind, you like plummet a lot. I would like Susan Boyle, Greta Thunberg. You know, it's hard to kind of pluck them out of your brain. But if you think of white males, you can think of Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Richard Branson, Henry Ford. You know, they just roll off the tongue. All right, Elon Musk. Oh, okay, controversial. Very subjective when it comes to celebrities / politicians. And also, we've got real life stories. This is when we're sharing real life things. And I like this one personally. And this is probably what Exceptional Individuals does best. You know, no one like, I am not a finished article, right? I am still learning to navigate how my brain works. But if I know one small tip that works, which someone else hasn't heard of, we can exchange, we can work together. This isn't like the kind of like teacher teaching the student. This is a collaborative approach. It's working together in order to like find ways around problems and to celebrate successes. These are things that I think have worked quite well. Now back to all of you. What neurodiversity campaigns are you aware of? Are there any which are currently happening in the community, ones that you've attended in the past that have worked really well, or even ones that haven't worked that well?
Neurodiversity in business.
Yes, Ali, that's a good one. I mean, they're relatively new. I'm hopefully we'll have a meeting with them soon.
Yeah, I'm friends with the founder and CEO.
Oh, nice stuff.
Yeah, but yeah, they're really good, and they're actually trying to branch out to reach more people. So,
oh well, I'd love to speak with their CEO. It's been on my radar for a bit. I just haven't had a chance yet.
Yeah, Dan is very friendly. So once you get chatting to him, he'll probably be in contact with you quite regularly.
Oh, good to know.
It's good. It's nice because obviously there's the stigma around us being antisocial, you know. So
yeah, and again, these stigmas, like, it's important to change. Like, people often think anyone with autism is antisocial. Not at all. You know, we're all individuals. It varies. I mean, anyone, no ideas at all? Any other people? Any kind of other ideas? Here are a few which I came up with, and this isn't exhaustive. It's the start. We've got Neurodiversity Celebration Week. That is coming up real soon. Autism Acceptance Month, Dyslexia Awareness Month, ADHD Awareness Month. You know, they're all around October, really. So, you know, it's a busy month for us. National Mental Health Awareness Month. And you might think, but no, I thought neurodiversity is not mental health. It's not, but a lot of the time people like to clump these together. We've got Dyspraxia Foundation, yes. The National Autistic Society, absolutely.
LinkedIn also are every day celebrating neurodiversity. They've been including pretty much anyone that states that they're neurodiverse when they join. They add us into a list, and they give us opportunities to network, like more than they usually would, and things like that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So yeah, LinkedIn and Amazon are also branching out into neurodiversity in their administration, more like the businessy office sides, but they are making an effort finally. So
well, thanks for sharing that, Ali. It was really interesting. Christian has said there's dyspraxia events in Birmingham, which is great. What else? There's lots of charities and foundations. I mean, there are lots of things going on, to be honest. They don't always have to be like massive global things. Sometimes it can just be a kind of a small little campaign.
You've got with the Slack group and Charlie Waller as well.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Brilliant. I'm trying to think of an example. I'm currently working with, you know, the retail brand Selfridges, and they currently, I think it's every Friday or it might be Thursday, but one day a week, they have an autism friendly hour where they lower the lights and kind of make things a bit more quiet. And that's a campaign they've done, which has been successful, that they have continued. Yes, as someone just said, supermarket quiet time, cinemas, when they do kind of autism friendly screenings. These are all examples of campaigns that have been really useful. Websites,
the Showcase Cinemas, they have every Saturday is their day for neurodivergent clientele.
Oh, brilliant.
Most of them anyway, and that's the luxe ones as well, not just the little ones in the corners, you know.
Nice. Things are becoming more and more widespread. Oh, Anna says Paper Chase. I think Paper Chase has kind of collapsed. I think they've all shut down now, which is really sad because I love that store.
Do you know, is there anywhere that there's actually a list of, because these are all amazing ideas around the campaigns and things that people are already doing, but I'd like to actually have a list where I could share it out with staff at the council. I think it would be really useful just as an additional support for people that wouldn't know. I didn't know half of the stuff you're all talking about. I just think it would be a great idea if someone already has a list that they've compiled. Or
you know what, Amy? I totally agree with you that this list would be really useful. I personally do not have one, but it's definitely something which I think we could start to make and put together.
I'm a researcher and consultant, so I'm in the process of forming one.
Yes, Natalie.
The reason that I know all this stuff is because, to be honest, I've had to put the hours and the weeks and weeks of working, because it's not easily available. I work in inclusion, accessibility and all of that, directly to do with disabilities, neurodivergent, deafblind, and everyone said the same thing. Yeah. This stuff's out there, but the people, like, you've got big companies like Amazon that hardly anyone knows that they're branching out in, like, and they're actually trying to promote hiring neurodiverse people on all levels, not just you know, particular areas. And obviously the focus has been on climate change. There's been a lot of climate change and social injustice stuff that's been going over the neurodiversity. Right. So all of that stuff drowns it out, but you have to hunt it down. Definitely.
You not want to sell it to us?
The Open University have got a load of free courses in neurodiversity. Grey matter learning for under £8 a month subscription. You can earn all different types of stuff to do with social care and neurodiversity, and they actually aim that at neurodiverse learners, because sometimes it's better for us to understand ourselves if we learn about a subject professionally. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there.
Thanks so much, Natalie, for sharing that. And when you have created this list, I would love to see it, because there is amazing things going on out there, but it's just, you're right, it's not common knowledge at the moment. Now on here are some projects which are underway, obviously in a more generic term. I'd love to know what you think is the most useful to when it comes to combating stigma and kind of making people feel more included. I also take this into consideration when we're creating events as well. We've got media engagement, grants schemes to fund grassroots projects, focus work in minority communities, working with children, or community events. Okay, now it says the third and the fifth one. What we got? Oh yeah, focus on minority communities and community work. I mean, it is all going to change in a sec. Okay, nice. I'll give you a moment to have a little think of that. So we've got the first project, the type of project, which would be arguably the most useful, is community projects. That is involving everyone. Your nan, your auntie, your nephew, your children, you know, your doctor, like religious leaders, bringing everyone together. Then we've got grant schemes to fund grassroots projects. And that's quite an important one because yes, there are massive organizations like the National Autism Society and Dyslexia Foundations, right? They're huge. But no one knows their people better than the grassroots schemes. So like the small local people who are making massive impact in the community every day, and money is just something which isn't a concern for them in terms of generating, but obviously they still need funds in order to put these events on. Focus work in minority communities. I think this is a really big one personally. It's again, while we talk about discrimination, in my experience, there are some minority communities which heavily stigmatize neurodivergence and not fitting in with the status quo. So kind of work in that community could be really beneficial. Media engagement, work with media, trying to get the views out there. While this impacts a lot of people, so sometimes like whenever I've done like media things, right, maybe I've been on like the TV for like 5 minutes and I didn't really say that much. The amount of people that would contact me afterwards looking for support is incredible. So the media is definitely not something to neglect. And working with children, I'm not surprised it's got the less amount of work because a lot of work already happens with children. It's the rest of us that often get neglected. Oh, Helen thinks grants and community as well. So yeah, that's really interesting, everyone. Now, what makes an event successful when it comes to neurodiversity? Anyway, what makes an event successful when it comes to being neurodivergent? All of you, pretty much, who have done this, says, including personal stories of ND people. Yep, all right, celebrities, chill. Let's hear from real people who we can really connect with. A role model for me is someone who's just a little bit further advanced than I am in a certain area, and I can see how I can tangibly get there. We got involving volunteers with lived experience. So this is essentially bringing us along with the journey. Nothing about us without us. We're going to be doing a session on that shortly. And celebrating accomplishments of ND people. This one has slightly less. And you know what? I'm going to have as a guess why I think that is. Because while we should absolutely be shouting about success, it shouldn't be all positives. Sometimes, you know, the struggle is also real. So having that nice balance of things that are going well, but also the things we're still struggling with is arguably a really nice blend. Accomplishments of ND and lived experience, please. Nice. Thank you, everyone. So moving forward, what are some of the challenges and hopefully suggestions which we can make things easier? Some top ways of preventing and challenging stigma are as follows. Seeing neurodiversity as human. So the fact that people think differently, we all have cognitive variation, is a natural part of the human existence. It should be something that we shouldn't look to cure because there's nothing to cure. As human beings, we benefit from diversity. Prioritizing a person's autonomy. Essentially, this is putting the person in the driver's seat. Allow them to be in charge of the narrative. So rather than just saying, this is how we should treat autistic people, we should be saying, okay, to people who have autism, what needs to happen? Let's involve people. And supportive communities. We should not have to champion our own cause. Everyone should. It's like, you know, when people are championing Black Lives Matter, you need people who have all different skin colors to like help promote it. When we do about the Me Too movement or gender equality, it can't just be females. It has to be everyone. So everyone has to support this, not just the people who it's directly impacting. Now, here are some of the useful areas I used to research today. Check some of them out if you fancy. This is recorded, so I will let you, you will be able to catch up on it later. And if any of you are neurodiverse and currently in the UK, do get in contact with us, okay? Because we can often give you a free workplace needs assessment in order to help you have support, equipment and training, coaching, mentoring, you know, et cetera, et cetera. I talk about it every webinar. It's a really kind of useful thing, which currently is being offered to UK individuals who are employed. If you do not fall into this group, but you would still want help, get in contact with us anyway, because we might still be able to support you as part of our social aims. We do record these webinars, so do check out our YouTube channel. I would appreciate a sub. Just go Exceptional Individuals in YouTube, and you can watch our previous ones of me blabbering about, but hopefully nicely insightful. We also have our next webinar next week, which is the rise of the expert by experience. And this is a really good follow-on from this session. Beforehand, the expert was the doctors, the professors, the people doing the research. But now we are seeing more and more people who have lived experience, not necessarily the academic experience, but the personal experience. And we're going to be viewing how this has helped the movement, but we're also going to be looking at the limitations of it. You know, there wasn't there a while ago where we are beyond experts now. No, we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Experts are still important, but having a range of experts and changing what we mean by expert. So yeah, check that out, please. And here's our contact details if you fancy getting in contact. And that is it for today. But I really hope you all enjoyed this as always. Thanks again for attending. And I look forward to seeing a lot of you again next week. Have a lovely rest of your Thursdays. Bye, everyone.